Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. It's time to get back on the 68 Camaro. I've had other projects that I've had to do over the last week and it took up time, and I'm ready to get back on the Camaro. So this will be part 10 in the basket case Camaro rebuild. Now in the other parts of the videos or the other videos, I talked about the origination of the car, like where I got it from, you know, if you go back to the very first video, and also what my plans were. And I am now in the process of completing some of that work. So in the previous videos, I did a test fit of the entire side of the driver's side of the car. The door opening and the wheelhouse and the quarter panel and all that stuff has all been mocked up and is clamped in place. From there, I came over to this side of the car and I replaced the outer wheelhouse, and I've also replaced the rocker panel, or at least I sectioned out the bad part of the rocker panel and I've welded together the new part. From there, I have now reset the quarter panel on this side, and I'm making sure everything still lines up. So I'm going to go over some of that. The next phase in this is a continuation of prep work. Now, I've talked about it a little bit, I think, in some of my my live stream and even on my Patreon videos, that there's rust in this area right here. There's also a bit of surface rust in different places on the car, and I want to get that cleaned up. So this video, I'm not sure how far I'm going to get. I want to show you what I'm going to be working with. I also want to show you a new tool that I bought, and I picked it up off of Amazon, and it is going to speed up the process of getting these panels back on the car. So I'll just do a little walk around and show you what the status is right now. So once again, here's a look at the driver's side. Nothing is welded on this side just yet. In a previous video, I modified the angle here on the sail panel for the quarter, and that was to interact with the rain gutter, and there will be more on that later. Going around the rest of the vehicle, everything else is clamped in. You've got the inner structure for the package tray. I've got cross bracing inside the car if you haven't seen this already. So I have square tubing supporting the inner structure just in case, and of course it has no roof, and all these panels up here will be new. I do have the rearmost panel clamped in place, and I have the forward panel clamped in place, and that's just to help keep things from moving whenever I go to remove this, because this is going to come back out for the next thing, which is going to be removing some of this rust. The quarter panel on this side, if you saw in the previous videos, I did a lot of work to make the wheelhouse line up, and it fits very well. I wanted to show down here the alignment. This is, of course, the new rocker panel, and you can see the quarter is pretty much dead on. So very happy with that. I did weld the wheelhouse to the inner wheelhouse, and also the rocker panel to the wheelhouse as well. In the forward area here, things look pretty good. The body line is really nice. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with how all of this looks. I do have an issue that I'm going to have to deal with. Maybe I may have to redo this section. If you saw in another video, I had to modify that one because I could not get the rain gutter up high enough, and that may come into play as well on this side. So this piece right here, this corner is supposed to catch this corner and create the rain gutter, but I really at this point can't go back very far. Now something that's going to come into play, let me pull this gutter out of the way, but something that's going to come into play is this angle right here. Now I'm just pointing this out because when you're doing this sort of stuff, everything needs to interact with everything else, basically. So if you look, I don't know if you can tell how this is a really downward angle. You can see it's, and it may be accurate, but if I compare it to the one on this side, the angle is not as extreme. Now I don't know if these are a matching set of panels. I don't know if they came from the same manufacturer. That is up in the air. I don't know. I assume, you know how assuming goes. I assume they are, but this one definitely has a different angle on it. it's more, I won't say 90 degrees, maybe 70 degrees, something like that. But you come back to this one, and you can really see this is almost flat. So I think maybe I'll gain some by taking a hammer and dolly and straightening up this edge a little bit. I will point out that the angle on this, it does have an angle, but I don't think it's as far as the part on the sail panel. While we're here, I'll show you that I have welded in the seam that I had cut to make this go together. Of course, the rest of that is behind what would be the A-pillar, and of course welded through that area as well. The underside, it is welded. I just haven't sanded it down yet, so that'll take some time. And then this front section, I still have to weld this together, so not too big of a concern there. But everything's looking really good at this point, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I'm going to pull the quarter off and show you what I plan to do with the inside. So there's the rest of the weld seam that I was talking about, and of course all this is welded. Now, this is what I was mentioning before with the rust. Normally you could not access this. If you had the quarter panel on the car and you're trying to get back in here and clean this up, there's just really no way you're going to get all this out of there. So I'm going to take advantage of the situation while I'm here and try to get rid of some of this rust. Now, to do that, I'm going to use this little pressure pot. I've used this before, and I will admit I made a poor choice. I used like play sand in this thing, thinking that that was a cheap alternative and that it would do the job. And it did the job on the light blue Mustang that I did years ago. Cleaned up the firewall and the aprons and all that, but it was a lot of work to make that thing cut, and it kept clogging and different things. So what I did is I bought 100 pounds of black diamond, and this is a slag abrasive. This was a Tractor Supply, like 10 bucks a bag. The trunk pan has just a little bit of surface rust, which I could blast, or I could even wire wheel and get most of this out of there. And then something else I need to address, and I know I've talked about it before, with the tail panel. There's, I think I counted 140 welds in this section right here, and you can see all the little holes where it was, ground apart or cut apart. More than likely, I don't plan to do 140 welds to put this tail panel back on. It just doesn't make any sense. Little things I need to do is straighten out this intersection right here where it's been pressed up, so I'll get that taken care of. This area here, I will do prep work on it, and more than likely, if the holes are solid, or let's say holes, if the holes if the holes go all the way through, I'll probably use those as weld points. But if they're solid metal where it's just ground off, I'll put some where they need to be, but again, I'm not going to do 100 welds on this thing. So I may just clean up some of these and come up with my own pattern. Over here, I think there's more holes. I'll try to match it up on either side so it looks decent. But of course, all that'll be inside the car. Now, part 7 of this is I want to show you another tool that I will be using to prep these different areas. Now, this rain gutter, I could either use this one or the one from the other side. And if I set this in place where it's supposed to go, you can clearly see all the areas where there was a weld. So normally what I would do in this case is take a Sharpie and indicate where those were so that I have a reference point when I come back to make the holes so that I can put this back on the car. So let me show you what I'm going to use to make the holes. Okay, so this is what I'll be working with. Now, I was looking on the internet trying to find a hole puncher, right? And you can look at Harbor Freight, and they've got those ones that are like 35 bucks or something, and they punch, I think, a 1/4 inch hole, which is too small in my opinion. I don't use 1/4 inch unless I would absolutely have to because of edge distance, but 5/16 is where I go. So I went online and I found this. Now this is on Amazon. It just popped up as an option. I don't know who makes this thing. I mean, it's got something on the side here. I can't even read it. The paint is just so thick on this. And you know, this, I like the way it operates. You know, you've got like a gun rather than trying to squeeze a side trigger. So this gives you a little more control. But what I really was after was this, because now the biggest drawback to those little hole punchers is you can only get so deep into the metal. So as an example, this is probably your normal drop length on one of those little handheld ones, right? The little long cylindrical ones. But this thing, it's as deep as you want to go, you know, within range. I'm not sure what that total distance is. Let me find out real quick. So this length, if you go overall, it's about 1.75 inches. So granted, you know, you're going to go in 1.75 inches, but to get to center of the hole, you're probably about 1 5/8, somewhere on that range, or edge of the hole. You know, that's where you want to kind of pay attention to where you're punching. So 1 5/8 is a pretty good number, and that would be without using the little adjustment tool. So this is how it shows up. This is it. I'm sure because of what I found on Amazon, they sell different size cutters or plunger, whatever you want to call it. And I have not taken this apart, so I'm sure this piece comes off and you swap out the inner piece, and you may, I don't know, maybe able to buy this piece separate. I haven't gotten that far. I just wanted to get it and get it in my hands and try it out. I will tell you, this is $110. So it's not the $35 Harbor Freight thing. What I did not like was it just came in this box. It came in this bag with an air fitting, and it's one of those, I forget what they're called, the M fitting or something. I don't know, but it's got the bigger hole in the center. I'm not set up with that, so I can't use it. But that's a variation that I may come up into later. It also came with 2 really generic wrenches, and I mean like really, really generic wrenches. But if they do the job, who cares? Also, and it came with, there's a little plastic bag for the wrenches, and it came with, I'm assuming, instructions. I can't read that. I have no idea what any of that says. But on the other side, it has a, you know, an exploded view of the gun itself. So it looks like, again, there's probably a way to swap out that part if you can figure out how to get the other parts. I don't know. Whatever this means here, you know, I don't know. So, but what I was disappointed in, it was just in this box. There was no other padding, nothing. So it was just rattling around in there. Anyway, let me show you what this thing can do. I've got a couple pieces of metal here on the table. Let me hook up my air. And when you squeeze this, you can see this plunges, and then it blows air out down here. So, pretty good kick to it. I'm going to run this up a little. Okay, so this is what's left of the outer wheelhouse from the Camaro. That's your standard sheet metal thickness. I'm going to just set this thing up, hit the trigger, and it just smacks the hole right out of there. I mean, there's no... Beautiful. And again, you know, you can change that depth. You want to go in deeper? Go in deeper. So, I'm very happy with this. Now, the other thing is, this metal I think is like 36 thousandths normally, somewhere in that range, around that range. Gauge number, I don't know. I go by thousandths. You know, being an aircraft mechanic, we measure in thousandths. So, this is 55 thousandths. This is part of the rocker panel, the piece that I cut off. And that's thicker metal than the wheelhouse or any body panel. And you can see I punched a hole in it already. But I want to punch another hole just to show you. This is you know, thicker metal. That's really nice. Really nice. So on this punch through earlier, it kind of dimpled the hole when it pulled out. So I don't think it's a big concern. You can take a little dolly or hammer and knock that down. But that's what I plan to do with the rain gutter. Now I will point out this probably would have been easier, since I'm trying to film this, had I duplicated these marks on the back side, because then I could hold this in upright position, right? But for now I am doing it upside down, and that takes just a little more effort on my part to hold the thing, just so you know. But what I planned to do is I measured roughly where I wanted the holes to be, and then I tried to set that as the depth, and I can just, again, I'm trying to hold it upside down. So I'm going to line that up. I got pretty close. So that's it. Bullet pattern. Beautiful. Much faster than running that drill. Alright. Not that I'm ready to install this yet, but I just wanted to demonstrate the hole punch capabilities. And, you know, I got pretty close. Pretty close to where those grind marks were from the previous weld. So, yeah, good deal. Now what I'll do is also transfer the location of these holes onto the other piece, because that piece, there's no original roof piece to go by. So all that is new. So I'll transfer or replicate these holes relative to this side, and then I'll prep the roof panel on that side. So as I said, I'm going to use this pressure pot that I bought from Harbor Freight, and I need to get the sand out of it. The biggest problem with that kind of play sand stuff, well, obviously apparently there's health reasons to not use it, but the bigger problem I had was clogging up the nozzle, and you'd have to fight with it. So I'm hoping this thing is still okay. I have not tried it out in many years, so ideally I should be able to take off this cap and dump out whatever's in it. Well, thankfully that came out okay. You can see there's probably a couple pounds of sand here, and it had gotten chunky. So it all came out, and I cleared the hose as well. You can see it not very well, but it looks like it's pretty clean. Camera won't focus past there. It goes. A little bit of corrosion in there, but shouldn't be a concern. I did blow out the hose as well, so I should be ready to go and put that black diamond in and see how that goes. Before I do any actual blasting, I want to do some prep work. What I'm doing is removing the seam sealer out here on this outer edge. This is an overlap of these two panels. This is the drop-off panel that goes down to where the quarter attaches on. This is the wheelhouse if you're trying to get a perspective. Quite a bit different from a Mustang. You know, this Camaro trunk pan, it runs almost the full width of the opening in the trunk. Whereas the Mustang, this piece is one big piece, and the line is inside here. Of course, your gas tank sits in the Mustang floor. So a little bit different, but still same kind of concept. You're going to have the seam, and there's a lot of this already separating. You can just barely see where it was hanging on, but I want to show you the other side of what I found underneath. On the driver's side, the seam sealer was in better condition. I had to take a screwdriver and start way back here at the corner and work my way up, and it mostly came loose in one big piece. So if I pull on that, it'll just break off, but you can see the underside of that. What you also will see is some dirt in here, but also where these welds were. I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me zoom in a little. Not that it's critical, but there is some rust on top of those spot welds. Really, overall, this is in great shape. If I take a screwdriver and continue to knock off the rest of the sealer, you can see it really did a good job. Up here, there's no rust showing, and the metal is pretty clean. So, you know, just consider that when you're trying to do these sort of things. You know, if I'm going to blast, the seam sealer will just get in the way and bounce the media back off of it. So there's a little more I can take loose up here. And of course, that goes all the way around the inner wheelhouse. So, just something to think about doing your prep work, and I'll have to remember to come back in and reapply new seam sealer in this area. Okay, we'll see how this works. I haven't used this pod in years. I'm hoping that I don't get too much media blasting towards the camera. I do have my little hood I can wear and some gloves, so let's see what happens. Alright, that hood is pretty hot. Now, obviously, it would probably make more sense to have some plastic down to catch this stuff, but I really just wanted to see what it would do. And it appears it already has a blockage. So rather than film all of that, I'll show you what the media has done. So I'm kind of experimenting, you know what I mean? So there's what's on the ground. There's more up in the back of the car and all over the driveway, which is to be expected. But look at that. That actually did a pretty good job of cleaning up that pitted up rust. So I'm going to do some more blasting on it. Hopefully that blockage isn't too bad. But I did find that this tip, that's just too small. So I'm going to have to see if I have another tip that's slightly bigger, if I can swap that out. Because there's no way that stuff is going to travel through that tip. You can maybe see just how big that stuff is, and for it to go through that tip, it would have to be lined up perfect. So anyway, it's working. Alright, I think I accomplished what I set out to do, and that was to clean up the rust on these pieces primarily. Anything else would be kind of a bonus at this point. So they look pretty good. Now I'll still treat these and put some paint on them, but that's the main thing I was focused on. I also hit this area down here, got all the big stuff off. Hit this channel a little. Got most of it cleaned up. This back section where the tail panel attaches, cleaned up a good bit of that as well. And this other lower section. So it didn't like clean up the metal to like a shiny effect, which is fine. But I will treat this with a rust inhibitor and then put some paint on top of it and it'll be good. Up here I did blast a little in these corners, cleaned up those areas some, but the biggest concern I had is taken care of. The media I managed to pick up this is probably close to 50 pounds in this bag. There's obviously a lot of media inside the car, and I'll clean that up later, but it's to be expected, you know, it just goes everywhere. I did run into a bit of a problem with the blaster. What I found was this valve, which, you know, this is pretty generic as far as a function, it was continuing to blow air even when I shut it off. So it was not restraining media whenever I shut the valve off. So I kind of just stopped and decided I'll probably have to get another one of those valves, see what I can do from there. But overall, you know, I can't complain. It did what I needed it to do. So like I said, what I plan to do is use some of this Naval Jelly Rust Dissolver. I'll just put some in this little plastic bowl here. I'll use a little chip brush to brush it on. It says to leave it on about 10 minutes maybe, and then rinse it off with water. So I'm going to work on these areas down below here on both sides, try to get those cleaned up and ready for some paint. I also stopped by Lowe's and I bought some self-etching primer. I'm not sure if I'm going to use that yet on this area or just automotive primer. All I want to do is get some paint or primer on there to protect it after I clean it up. So that's the plan. It's pink. Now I only want to put enough in there in the bowl to do the job at hand. I don't want to put any of that back into the bowl. So I'm just going to take the brush. And of course I do have the garage door open, so this is ventilated. Really surprised at just how solid these pieces are on this car. I mean, the whole car is relatively solid, other than the damage from the rollover or the tree or whatever happened to it. But so let that sit 10 minutes and I'll rinse it off. Okay, it's been a little over 10 minutes, so I'm just going to spray this down, neutralize it. I did put some on top, so I'm going to neutralize that as well. And now I'll just let that dry and I can come back and spray primer on that and it'll be good to go. Okay, so I've let this sit overnight. You can see how it has turned into kind of a white coating. And now I'm just going to spray that with some Rust-Oleum and that'll be it. That's all I'm going to do to prep this. So basically I'm going to repeat that process. I will do that all up here in these areas that I've already blasted, of course. I'll do the same thing over here, and I'm not going to film all that. It would be kind of boring, I think, to show, but I'll move on and get that taken care of, and then we'll see what comes next. Alright, that'll be the end of this video. I know you're expecting to see sheet metal back on the car at this point. I'm not ready for that. It's all these little things that are underneath and you don't see on the TV shows and stuff like that that need to be addressed prior to getting all that in place. I think I have a good start with the media blasting that I did on those pieces. And again, I'm going to do the navel jelly and clean up any excess exposed rust that I can. Put some primer on there and call it good to go. So anyway, I hope you found some information that will help you with your project. If you would, leave a comment, leave a thumbs up. And there is a new feature that is now available on my videos. Down below, there is a thanks button. And what that means is if you feel like throwing a tip at me for information that I may have shared with you, you can do that through that function. But that'll be it for this video, and until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.